The Liberal Democrats candidate for Lincoln, Reginald Shore, spoke to the Linc's Tom Farmery to explain his plans and policies for the upcoming general election. I started by asking him why it's important for people to vote, regardless of party.
It's very important at this time, clearly because we're at a crossroads of a change. We've had 65 years of two-party control, Labour, Conservative, a bit like a game of ping pong, back and forwards. It's our turn now. Come on then, guys, in we go. Every one of those times, it's ended in some kind of a disaster. And, they've been thrown out by the people because the people are so fed up, they've been disappointed, disillusioned, lost. And, of course, the others take over for the same thing to go on and on again. Now, the only answer to that would have been some kind of proportional representation so that the voting public were actually represented in a vote. But as it stands, 36% of the population of this country can vote in one party, which they did in the last election. And Labour actually had 57% of the seats based on that small percentage of people who voted for them. Liberal Democrats, we had 23% of the votes, but we only got 10% of the seats. And that's clearly wrong. It's a problem. It's not just apathy, it's also a lack of understanding and, a lack of frustration. Certainly, I feel sorry for students in lots of ways. I mean, young people have had it really tough for some time, and it's been increasingly getting worse for them. Any aspect of young lives now are an issue. For instance, if you want to buy a house, impossible. Yes. If you get a car, insurance rates are astronomical. If you're a student, you will leave with £25,000 in debt. If possibly more. A girl that works for me, exactly that. She started with £20,000 in debt. She's just started paying back that money, £25,000 worth off. Now that's no way to start life. Well, we have said that we will scrap tuition fees as we've done in Scotland. Unfortunately, since we said that we would scrap them, the Labour Party have managed to screw up the economy wonderfully. To such an extent that they ignored us 4 years ago when we warned them that the housing bubble was going to burst. And unless they did something about it, some kind of fiscal management, some kind of interruption, because some kind of clamping down upon cheap loans, as they were doing in America, then that bubble would indeed burst and then you would lose the bottom out of the market. Consequently, we would be seriously compromised for money. And now we are, how many trillion pounds in debt? And of course, now this is another thing I've got to tell you, that young people ought to be very, very angry about that. We can certainly make the expectation. Now, it is not good enough that students leave school with their GCSEs and their BTECs and diplomas. It is not good enough that students leave universities with their degrees. And then the next lot start, because the connection's got to be made. Schools have got to do more. We ought to be measured on the success of the students 2, 4, 5 years after they've left, not when they're there. Point systems and targets. Same with universities. The university's success ought to be measured on the amount of work that those students find. That would sharpen up the professorships, that would sharpen up the deanery. Okay, we've got to think smart here, guys. How are we going to help these young people to actually get to where they want to be? The systems around Lincoln needs really radically changing. For instance, the ring road needs to be created so that traffic doesn't have to come through the centre of the town, first and foremost. When that's sorted, then we ought to be working on the park and ride systems at all 4 entrances to the town, to the city. We ought to be also working with the train stations. There are 3 or 4 opportunities for us to develop park and ride with the trains. Unfortunately, 1, they're not frequent enough. 2, the whole thing is not integrated well enough, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to start working on that. All it takes is commitment. Let's get some of the traffic off the streets, and let's make a much more integrated system. I wouldn't know. No, I think it's the value of life, it's the quality of life that counts. every time. And if you've got to worry about your shareholders and that becomes your first point of call, then I'm afraid you will not get a system that works. And of course, people will become marginalised because it's not, it's a bit like broadband really. It's okay if you live in certain areas, but if you're slightly out of the city, in the rural areas, you are a second-class citizen. That's not right, you know. We live in one country and we ought to be seen as one country, working together. There is so much opportunity for change. There is so much that we can do, but we've got to start thinking differently. And we've got to try and get out of the rut of the past.